Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. My name is Aubrey Coleman, one of the hosts for the podcast, and today we're looking to Ezekiel chapters 28 through 30. Chapter 28 continues Ezekiel's prophecy against Tyre, and this time drawing attention to their ruler. Pride and arrogance characterize him, and he considers himself to be a god. But Ezekiel tells of his impending death. Though full of wealth and wisdom, the king of Tyre cannot stop his own fall, nor the fall of his people. As soon as the Lord speaks to his death, he shifts to a compassionate lament. God does not delight in wickedness and the punishment it brings. Ezekiel speaks to the heart of God by taking note of what the king of Tyre once was: beautiful, blameless, full of splendor and wisdom. But his pride was likened to every other sinful man, and as mentioned, pride goes before the fall. His haughty arrogance and rejection of God led to his own destruction. Chapter 29 begins a series of prophecies against Egypt. Though Egypt had formerly been a place of bondage for God's people, lately Israel had been too friendly with them and too dependent on them. Egypt held Israel in slavery for 400 years, yet Israel typically turned to Egypt in times of crisis. This response predated their enslavement all the way back to the time of Abraham. Isaiah and Jeremiah even warned God's people not to ask Egypt for help, but they still did, instead of looking to God for help. The first prophecy against Egypt was given a year before King Nebuchadnezzar began his siege of Jerusalem. God is not only judging the ruler of Egypt for his sins, but for the sins of the entire nation. The ruler was held responsible for the whole nation. Like the ruler of Tyre, Pharaoh was a prideful ruler of Egypt. Instead of acknowledging God as the giver of life in all things, Pharaoh vainly claimed that the Nile River was made for him. For this, God would humble him and remind him of who was truly ruler over all things. God would make him a spectacle, so that all of the Egyptians would see Pharaoh as a mere man, not a god, and Egypt would experience judgment. Egyptians would be refugees and captives for 40 years. After 40 years, Egypt would be restored into a lowly kingdom, and Israel would never trust them again. Then, 16 years after the first prophecy is given, Ezekiel prophesies that King Nebuchadnezzar would come up against Egypt, and they would fulfill God's judgment against both Tyre and Egypt, and the Babylonians would profit from their fall. After Egypt's humiliation, Israel would begin its restoration. The remnant God preserved would reemerge as a nation, and all the surrounding nations would witness the magnitude of God's power and justice displayed. In these chapters, God confronts and destroys the nations that have set themselves against him and his people. But he also proves in the process that their nations' gods are not gods at all, and that he is the only true God. The imagery in these chapters shows God's confrontation of pagan deities. God will have no rivals, and he makes this point strongly through Ezekiel's prophecies. There will be no doubt who rules and reigns once God is finished, and it is God who will receive the glory due his name. God works all of these things according to the counsel of his good and perfect will. We all deserve judgment, but for those who seek refuge in Jesus Christ, we find freedom from what we deserve. We are no longer set against God, but we stand with him, and there we find refuge and safety, because God works all things together, even the seemingly difficult and challenging things of this life, for our good and for his glory. Thanks so much for joining us today. Be sure to follow along on our Instagram pages at Daily Grace Podcast and at The Daily Grace Co. And check out our website, www.thedailygraceco.com, for all kinds of resources to help you to dive deeper into God's Word. You can always find resources to accompany the podcast at dailygracepodcast.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode and are excited to join us again tomorrow, we would love for you to take a moment to share this podcast with a friend or to leave a rating or review on iTunes to help other people find it. Thank you so much, and we look forward to chatting again tomorrow.